multitudes?
You're not supposed to say one before you start doing the thing.
Oh, well, it's thing. It's a thing.
You're supposed to go 3, 2.
Oh, the silent as you throw it over.
Yeah, because you don't. It's like, I don't know if you start on 1, you start after 1.
That's a good question.
These are things nobody ever taught us in podcast school.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct. Tens of thousands of dollars down the drain.
I know. Terrible education.
Should have never gone to podcast school.
It's like I practically didn't even get one.
I know. What a waste.
Yeah. Ain't nobody praying for me.
Oh, Kendrick. Always with us in spirit.
Yep. New Kung Fu Kenny.
I'm telling you, Kung Fu Kenny is one of the best nicknames of all time. I wish that I had a nickname
like that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
My life would be different.
That's true. Yeah. So like,
better? I'm trying to think. Better, different. I don't know. Probably just different.
Would people be picking fights? Like if your name was Kung Fu Kenny and you're walking down the street and people are like, hey, that's Kung Fu Kenny. I know Kung Fu, right? Very sort of Matrix Neo style. I know Kung Fu.
Yeah.
Like, would people be challenging you in order to claim the belt, claim the title? Would it be Elder Wand like all over again? Is that what I think it is?
Let the record show.
This is great audio for those who are not on the stream, by the way. the audio version.
They can all imagine what's happening right now.
I'm going to do my best public radio voice. Christian Gonzalez is holding up what appears to be the death stick.
No, this isn't
the Elder Wand. It's the death stick. That's what they call it.
You don't want to sell me death sticks. You want to go home and rethink your life. I'm going to go home and rethink my life. You want some death sticks?
Oh man, how are you doing?
I'm doing okie dokie, man. You know, these are the last days here. That sounded really ominous, and it feels that way because these are really the last. I was looking into my, app on the telephone for weather. That was like the worst possible way to say that. I was looking at my weather app on my phone earlier, and I saw that we have like 70 degrees today, and we have like 60 something degrees tomorrow, and then it's like 85, 87, 89. 88, 86. And it's like, we're just, we are kissing winter goodbye here. Yes. And by winter, I mean 70 degree temperatures and 60 degrees temperatures. So
you poor thing.
By winter. So we are welcoming summer with white pasty skin and hurt feelings.
You're both physically and emotionally completely unprepared.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is the point when the rest of the country is like, the sun is coming out. And we're like, oh, the sun is coming out.
We live on the surface of the sun. It's what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, that whole like essence energy distinction that we were talking about before, it's like, this is what I'm trying to say is it's like the rest of the country experiences the energies of God. We live in the essence and are burned alive thereby.
You've been consumed into nothingness.
Yes. We have approached the unapproachable and have paid the price.
I love that Phoenix is an object lesson in Palamite theology.
Yes.
Like, would you like to experience this for real? Yeah. Come die with us.
The essence of God is unknowable except in Phoenix.
Yes. No one shall look upon the face of the Lord and live. Proof.
See for reference Phoenix. Yeah.
Moses on the slopes of Mount Sinai is like, this reminds me of somewhere. I can't put my finger on it.
Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. But it's cloudy today, so I'm happy.
Okay.
It's weird. I think that like my seasonal affective disorder probably is just like, another sunny day. It's all the same. Every day is the same. Nothing ever changes. And then it's like, here come the clouds. Da, 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 da. Everything's going to be all right now. Everything's going to be all right. I can't see clearly anymore. The rain is here.
You're like you're Andy Dufresne when he crawls through the drain pipe and he gets out and it's raining and he's just like, it feels good.
Meanwhile, the Hallelujah chorus is just playing in my mind the entire time.
Yeah.
You know, it's good. It's good stuff.
It wouldn't be a movie without Leonard Cohen. Let's be honest.
That's not what I was thinking of.
Oh.
I was thinking of Handel's Messiah.
Oh, okay. And I was thinking of
Hallelujah.
You broke my eardrum. That was very loud.
I think I broke everybody's eardrum. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you heard that. Yeah. My stomach just growled.
Wow.
Loudly. Yeah, that was Lent talking to me. When do we get to eat hamburgers again?
Bring, bring. Hi, is Steve there? This is Lent.
Are you having fun yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're a week in. I started feeling it like this weekend in particular. It's like made it 5 days in. Like, okay, feeling good. I've got this under control. And then no.
Easy. This is going to be an easy 40 days.
Yeah. No.
That was. It's kind of yesterday. That was how I felt a little bit. Not with Lent, but I started like going back to CrossFit because like the gym is right over here is doing like really just incredible social distancing stuff. Like they have everything marked out in like a just a huge box where you're at least like 10 feet away from everyone else. So like you stand in like your little tape square and you do all of your stuff in there with your whatever, you know. So there was like a rowing that needed to happen, and the workout was like 2 rounds of a 1,000 meter row, and then like 35 what are called toes to bars, and then 15 deadlifts, which is it was a crazy thing. Woof. But the 1,000 meter row, I haven't rowed in like 2 years, you know? And so I hopped on the rower and I was just going, I'm like, okay, like I remember like take it easy, whatever. And the first like 250 meters, I was like, oh, this is going to be no sweat. I've got this made. And then by like meter 600, I was just like, God, kill me. Please take me now. Please, let this just be the end. I want this to
now
be
let your servant depart in peace.
Yes, exactly. How is it possible that I still have 400 meters to go? Like, I'm not going to make it. I think I am going to die.
That's intense.
Yeah.
That's intense.
It was a lot.
Look at you.
Yeah. You know, I'm trying to do it. Trying to do that new CrossFit Kenny.
That's your new nickname. You are officially now on this podcast. You are CrossFit Kenny.
New CrossFit Kenny. Ain't nobody praying for me.
And yet I still have 1,000 meters to go.
Yeah. Please somebody pray for me. Please somebody pray for me.
Oh, mercy. That's funny.
Lord God of our fathers, hearken and have mercy.
Oh man, what else we got going on? So you're exercising, which is good. I'm doing some at-home exercises. Nowhere near on the. I'm like on my rug in my office here. Nothing. No 1,000 meter. Nothing. I have exercise bands. That's about it. Still doing our thing. Still making the Be the Bees and the pop cultures and the small group stuff. And I think we're going to keep going at least through Pascha. I think we're gonna pause Be the Bee after Pascha for a couple of weeks. Then we've got a couple of little crossovers with the Lord of Spirits that are going to hopefully come sometime after Pascha, which is going to be cool for Be the Bee. We are possibly, with the vaccines and all sorts of things getting better nationally when it comes to COVID, we might do bee treats again starting in the fall, which is looking kind of exciting because it's been a while. It's been such a long time. Yeah, so like this could be nice. I do miss hanging out with you every month. Like that was always one of the highlights of the year. I agree. That's not a fun fallout of any of this stuff. You know, there really has been. I'm realizing more and more just overall, like how much healing needs to occur as a result of the last. Well, I don't think the last year caused a lot of the healing that needed to occur, the wounding that needs healing, but I do think it revealed a lot of it. And now I think we're all feeling it for so many reasons. And I don't know, it's interesting. It's been interesting, the fallout of
of 2020 as it's proceeded into 2021.
Yes, here we are in the 15th month of 2020.
Yes, exactly.
Well, you're right. I mean, like, yeah, this is something we talked about a bunch over the course of the last year. Like, it's not necessarily causing new things, but revealing old things. And one of the challenges that we're going to have as like families, communities, people, do we go back to kind of the busted old normal of before, or do we actually confront some of these things head on and figure out what to do with them? Tis a question. Tis a question.
Yeah. Ignore.
I would like, yes,
2019
flaming
reboot.
hot Cheetos, please. Just give me all the flaming hot Cheetos. Exactly. What do flaming hot Cheetos taste like?
Hot.
Underrated line from the thing that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I don't know. Before we get into it, anything else like a follow-up wise to?
No, I don't think so, man. You know, we're just hanging in there, pressing on, keeping on, doing what we do, stealing elder wands.
Yeah, you be careful where you point that thing. It would be really unfortunate if one of us got Avada Kedavra in the middle of this podcast. Like that would just...
Don't say that. You're not allowed to say that.
No want.
You're not allowed to say that.
Whoa. Hey.
Hey, careful where you point that thing. Hey. Hey. Well, shall we get to it?
And what is the thing into which we shall be getting?
The thing... What we would like you to imagine is that we've gone back in time to the month of February in which we wanted to do this podcast and then did not do it and then did something else between that time and this time. But imagine that this was the second installment of our foray into art that has been created by Black artists in honor of Black History Month. We are going to discuss the FX show by our friend Donald Glover. He's our friend.
Wink.
And the show that it is called has a title, the name of which I'm about to say. And this is the name. And here's how you say it. Atlanta.
Thank you for revealing that you actually get paid by the word in your work here at Y2AM.
Yeah.
Like Charles Dickens of old, just getting paid by the word.
Yes.
It is the best of podcasts. It is the worst of podcasts. It is an audio format. It is a non-audio format. No, yeah, we're doing Atlanta. This is a podcast out of time, but better late than never because this is something really cool. So where do we begin?
Well, I think we should begin with spoiling a porg.
Because it is new. So 2 seasons of Atlanta are out. The latest one, I think, came out in 2018. 2 more are actually in development, apparently. I think seasons 3 and 4 got greenlit recently.
Kind of wild to me that they're going to do both of them at the same time.
Yeah. So this is kind of new. If you haven't watched this, we are going to be crossing the threshold into spoiler territory. So Christian, would you, as is traditional, announce the threshold crossing?
Unleash the porgs. Okay, it was just one porg. Unleash one porg.
Okay, that's fine. It's a sober season. In the Lenten spirit, it's just one porg.
Ugh. Man, standing socially distanced from all his other porg friends.
In his little box that's taped out on the floor of the gym.
He doesn't even have another porg on the other side of the Solea.
Rough stuff.
It's just a one porg chanting.
All in Plagal second. Very mournful.
Yes.
Very mournful.
I was going to attempt it, but I decided for everyone's sake that I will not.
To porg in Plagal second?
Yeah.
Let's workshop this offline. Let's workshop that offline.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Well, Atlanta. So we're in spoiler chair. We can talk about spoilers. I'll start with just a little bit of a summary about what we're getting into for those who are here with us behind the spoiler veil. So like we said, Atlanta TV series on FX. It is created by, as Christian referred to him, taking some very artistic, creative liberties, our friend, Donald Glover. Who's super awesome. I feel like I'd love to be his friend. He seems like a really interesting guy.
He loves me.
I believe you. So 2 seasons of Atlanta are in the books, 2016 and 2018. 2 more are in the process of being created right now in Europe, actually, because at the end of season 2, we see the guys going into Europe for a European tour. But what's the series about? It's really kind of centers around Ern, who's played by Donald Glover. He's kind of, I guess, the protagonist of the series. And he's a guy who we sort of get little bits. He would kind of drop into where he is in life. A Princeton dropout, a guy who had a lot of potential, but doesn't seem to have lived up to any of his potential, with a life that is kind of falling apart. I mean, he doesn't have a place to live. He doesn't have a job. His parents are fed up with him. He has a child with a woman named Vanessa, but like they're not really in a relationship, apparently. Just a lot of broken, tough stuff that's going on in his life. And his cousin, who's kind of an aspiring rapper, Al is his cousin, puts out a mixtape under his sort of stage name, his nom du hip hop, I suppose, Paperboy, and it kind of blows up. And Ern decides that this is an opportunity for him, so he's able to get the mixtape played on the radio. That begins the burgeoning career of Paperboy. Ern is his manager, so this becomes also his kind of ticket out of poverty and just the sort of stuckness that his life has been in for so long. And that's really where we go. And we end season 2 with a lot of stuff happening actually at the end of season 2, but Paperboy's career is taken off. Ern thought for a while that he was going to be fired as manager, but they're on their way to a European tour. I mean, the end of season 2 is actually pretty intense, but things are clicking and they're not. There's just kind of like this. Sometimes you feel like 2 seasons in, they're spinning their wheels and they're going in circles. Sometimes you feel like things are actually progressing, right? It's this very layered, tragic stuckness, glimpses of hope. But that's where we are. Like it's even hard to kind of talk about the plot over the first 2 seasons because it's not so much about plot. Sometimes it's about stuff that happens. But I don't know. Is that a fair description? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. I mean, I think the only thing that I would say is I don't think that Ern is the protagonist. I think that like this is one of the things that actually makes this show quite unique is its ensemble reality. Like it's not a show about Ern and his kind of whatever. It's the show about this corporate body. I think it's about like these people, you know, and I don't. To that end, I don't know that there's any one character in particular that the show is necessarily about.
That's fair.
As much as I do sort of think that like the show is about like life in Atlanta, in kind of like this, like the stuckness of it, and how all of these characters kind of are caught in that. And of course, like because of that, you know, I do think it's worth also mentioning that like there are some harder elements to the show, like things that, you know, I kind of had, like, I wanted to fast forward through myself and things like that too. So buyer be warned, you know.
Yes, it is intense as well. It is intense. It does get surreal. There is violence. There is some stuff going on. That's true. That's a good note. Yeah.
So, but overall, the show, for all of its hard elements, Donald Glover is a genius. Like, I mean, it's just like the show is brilliant. It's equally, somehow, I don't know how it manages to like hold this tension between being equally hilarious and heartbreaking. You know, like it is a painful and painfully funny show sometimes. Like there were times when I was laughing from, you know, my like a deep belly kind of laughter. Like the episode where Paperboy's on that talk show. That episode was so funny to me.
Yes.
Just because of his utter irreverence, you know, and man, everything about it is just, it's so good. But yeah, I mean, this is another one of those shows that I do feel like we're going to probably fail to do justice to, right? And I keep putting ourselves in places like this, where it's like, we couldn't really talk about Community. We couldn't really talk about Damn. What did we talk about last time? WandaVision. And there was like some stuff there that, you know, I think we probably highlighted like the villainous nature of Wanda, and maybe not so much like the fact that she's like this suffering grief, you know, person. This person going through deep grief. We probably highlighted just like, what the hell? Like, how did she get to just fly away? That's not fair. You know, go live in her little Florida retreat area. But like, Yeah, so I do think that there's a lot of things that we probably won't get to talk to and probably won't do
Totally.
justice to. And I do think, I want to be, I think, just as obvious about it, like as a white male living in Phoenix, Arizona, like there's a lot of things probably in the show that I don't think I understand. That said, I do think that what this show does is it gives you a really incredible feel for what life is like. More than like there being a message about it. Does that make any sense? Like, I feel like, like I may not get this, but I get it on like a deeper level in terms of like how it feels.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's, I mean, it really is kind of an artistic portrayal at the mood, the ethos, the struggles, right. Of like growing up. And Glover himself he's from Stone Mountain, Georgia. I'm not sure where that is, like in relation to Atlanta, if it's close or whatever.
I think it's
it is,
just like a little outside of it. I think he's from just like a little outside of Atlanta.
Okay. So that like that's where he grows up from. So like it's something that a place that he knows, sort of a culture and an atmosphere that he knows, and it is a way to invite us into this. Like, I mean, it's one of the interesting things about art, right? That it's able to pull back a curtain and actually give us like a glimpse into something that we otherwise wouldn't have access to. And I think that that's also one of the reasons why like it has that. It's funny and it's tragic at the same time. I mean, it gives you life with all of its kind of like hope and hopelessness. It kind of gives you like all of its very well-rounded, and I appreciate you bringing up that thing about it's an oversimplification to say that Ern is kind of the protagonist, and it's actually interesting too if you go back and you watch the pilot, right? Because the pilot in many ways is like the most formulaic piece of the entire series. And I remember reading a thing about Glover when he's talking about how he sold the pilot to FX, and he kind of gives them something like, here's the show that FX like wants us to make. And then once he gets the contract, right, he's able to make the show that he wants and actually sort of begin playing with things in a more sort of surreal way. Cause like his parents kind of disappear. Like you see them in episode 1, right? That dynamic sort of disappears.
Yeah.
There are entire episodes where Ern, right? Like Donald Glover, the most famous person in this show, doesn't show up.
He's not even in it for multiple episodes in a row.
Right. Yeah. Which on a like purely commercial PR point of view, like how are you not going to leverage your star power? Right.
Did you know he was Teddy Perkins?
Yes. But you could tell.
I could not tell. I had no idea. I was like, who is this guy? I mean, I knew it was like some like fake thing happening, but it was, that was a lot.
And that's the other thing too, right? Like Teddy Perkins is this like Get Out level horror, like American horror. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that episode.
Especially because Darius was in Get Out, so it had a very special like Get Out feel. To it. Yeah. Oh man.
But you could see it in his eyes. Scary. Like there was something in his eyes where I was like, I've seen some of those mannerisms when he was playing Troy in Community. Like there's just something about the character. And then it was confirmed later. But yeah, Teddy Perkins, like horror, right? There's like, these satires of commercial culture. There's the satire of the panel discussion show, and like it's almost like a BET sort of satire, I guess. Like the and then with fake commercials, right? I mean, it's poking its fun at all of these things. It's this really like wide-ranging, surreal thing that's just this like look at a slice of American life, and it's really
chicken wings well glow when people open boxes and things like that. It was like a little Pulp Fiction nod there.
Yeah. Oh, which is also a Community nod because they did an episode on that.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So there's a lot to get into, and I don't know. Like we should begin somewhere, right? But because we're not going to do it justice. There is a lot.
Definitely not. I think one of the things that you brought up, in the show is, it's hard to pin down, like you said, right? Because it's hilarious, it's devastating. But like, I think the way that probably even that like Glover would market it is foremost as a comedy. I think like it is just funny. And I don't know that when there's a woodpecker.
Oh, I don't hear him.
He just stopped. Listen. You hear that?
I don't.
Man, there's woodpecker.
Although I will pause to note, by the way, that for whatever reason, I leaned forward to listen when I very clearly have my earbuds in my ears. So the lean did nothing.
Lean into it, Steve. Lean into the woodpecking.
What?
Yeah. So I think like the thing with this is it's hard to tell kind of like where that line between comedy and tragedy is in this show.
Yeah.
And you said it best offline when you said that this is like a black comedy, right? In more ways than one. Again, I think that is true. And it's not just like a black show, right?
No.
Like, it's not about like yeah. I mean, it's for everyone. It's just a good show. Period. You know, right? Like it is entirely cast with African American actors, and it's about, I think, more than anything, kind of like experiencing the world through their eyes.
Yeah.
Right. Does that make any sense? And there's sometimes when it's really funny and it's really beautiful, and like that is just like dashed against the rocks in a moment's notice, you know? So I think that's kind of where it's like, oh man, where does this fall in the line of like comedy and tragedy? Does that make any sense what I'm saying? I don't know.
Yeah. Because it's not like a simple formulaic show that's just trying to do like a particular thing. As a portrayal of life, like life does have all of these complexities. I mean, you know, you think about, even as you're talking, I'm thinking, how would I describe this show? Because there are like, you can definitely describe it on some level as like a family drama, because, you know, it's like Ern and Vanessa struggling to like keep their relationship together. Will they, won't they? They also have the child together, right? Like at the end of season 2, they realize that Lottie is gifted, and suddenly they have to like send her to a better school. Otherwise they're potentially dooming her the way that Ern was doomed when he was younger, right? As the smart kid in a rough school. There's, you know, this like, is it this kind of commercial sort of story of ambition? Like Al's ascent up the corporate ladder with Ern? Is it, you know, this like stoner sort of comedy because like they're just, you know, they're smoking constantly and making these weird jokes? Like it's a little bit of everything. Is it this, you know, is it this neat, like this neo-Gothic, I don't know what you want to call it, like American horror story when you have some of these like get outy sort of elements? Like it's all of it. Because it's life, which is not quite so quantifiable.
Yeah, and then there's kind of like the weird like Curb Your Enthusiasm-esque moments, right? Where like like things just get so like what is happening right now? You know, like things escalate so quickly. Like when, you know, when Al and Darius go to try to like make a drug deal with Migos. Which was really funny to see them in there. I was like, oh, is that? Wait. And then at the end, we're like, yeah, we're Migos. I was like, oh, okay, it is. What's happening right now? I'm very confused about everything going on.
Yeah. That's true. Or the barbershop episode where Al just wants to get his haircut.
Oh my gosh, that was so stressful. Oh, it was so stressful. Yeah, no. We'll take you right back there right now. But we just got to make this quick, you know.
Yeah, and like steal this lumber, and like, the whole thing is so absurd.
And then like there's a hit and run, and it's just like everything just is like, oh gosh, make it stop.
Yeah. It's absurd, right? And it takes you to the like the edge of your discomfort, and then it just kind of takes you like further and further and further into it. And even that, right? Like some of those difficult elements which you have to laugh at, right? Because like the comedy is the only thing that sort of breaks the tension of Al being sort of like, you know, pulled around by this con artist, you know, barber,
yeah,
right? Who's also a con artist who's got all these like hustles and stuff that are going on the side, right? And it takes him 20 minutes just to finally like cut Al's hair. You know, like you have to laugh at like the absurdity of it and the you know, the craziness of it. Like that's where these things, like, you know, we sometimes talk about politics as a spectrum, but if you think about the extremes, they sort of like loop together. It's like things get so uncomfortable at some point that you have to laugh at them. Right. And things get so absurd on the other end that they become kind of tragic. It's like these things just sort of loop back onto each other.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to put it. And I think that looping is a good image too, because overall, I think like that seems to be the kind of the experience of these characters is one of looping, right? Like they just are stuck. They're stuck in this kind of this cycle. of all of it, right? They're kind of like trapped, for lack of a better way of putting it. Even Ern, right? Like, who's a Princeton dropout. Like, if anyone seems like they could have been the ones to have gotten out of this, it's Ern. And yet here he is, you know, like, he's homeless, he's jobless. He's got a baby, but not with the mom. And like, there's just so much like how did that happen? You know, like, you don't really understand that.
Because they mentioned the Princeton thing twice. Like, they mention it in the pilot, and they mention it in the penultimate episode, I think, of season 2. And it's like that's also, I think, something that gives it this air of authenticity, right? It's just kind of these moments which make sense to the characters that are in the story, but it's like we're dropping into this fleshed out world, right? And we're kind of like, we get mentions of something, and it has meaning to the characters in this narrative, but you know, it just, you pop in and you pop out. And we've gone two seasons, and we have no idea how Ern got into Princeton, why he dropped out. It just kind of like is mentioned.
It is what it is. It's just accepted. You know, it doesn't, and for the story, it doesn't really matter. It's like, he's stuck. That's all that you need to know, really. Which is really kind of the weird tragedy of the whole thing, right?
Yes.
No matter how much these characters try to change things for themselves, it seems like they just can't. They just can't.
Yes.
They can't do it. You know, I'm not exactly sure like where this fits in, but I don't know. Like, I'm thinking about the way out, right, of this kind of cycle is through, like, there needs to be money, right? Like, this is the idea. I think for a lot of like hip hop is kind of like even just like writing yourself out of a bad situation, right?
That's what Al says at some point, right? Like, rap is making the most of the bad situation.
Yeah, and kind of in some ways, you know, then you get like that, he has that girlfriend person who's like an Instagram model, or I don't know exactly, influencer of some kind, and she's kind of like
one of the most annoying words in the English language, by the way, influencer.
I know, so stupid. Ugh, like, people who are famous for being famous. Like, it's really all that it comes down to. But she is pretty willing to kind of like use her blackness as a commodity to get money, to get out of this bad situation, right? Where blackness is kind of put down. But in some way, like, it is this like weird system, like cycle of like down objectifying her own blackness, right? That's already being objectified and put down in this like cycle in Atlanta. So it's still kind of more of the same, right? In this weird way of like blackness kind of being treated as this commodity that you have to kind of use and work yourself out of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the same is true, I think, even with Paperboy. And this is, again, part of the tragedy is it's like, you know, he's using hip hop to kind of make the best out of this bad situation, or maybe he wants to use it to get paid so that he can get out of the situation, but he needs to get paid. So he's like selling drugs, and like, there's kind of like, again, like this like tough place that these people are in. Yeah. You know, of like, kind of like, again, it's back to like what I think what Kendrick Lamar put so beautifully in his album is like, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't.
Yeah.
Like, it's just either way, like either I'm, you know, selling my soul.
Yeah.
Or I'm selling drugs.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does, right? And like, because you see this in the arcs of particular people, like even with Ern or with Al, right? Who he starts rapping because it's a way that he sort of processes the difficulty of his situation. He uses it as a way out. But what happens? There's that really fascinating episode, like The Woods, right? Where he's walking down the street. He leaves the woman. He kind of breaks up with this influencer. He's walking. He sees these 3 guys. They recognize him, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's Paperboy, right? And they rob him. And like they're posturing as fans, whatever it is. He's actually gaining this notoriety, but like the higher he climbs the ladder, the bigger the target on his back gets. And he ends up this episode like mugged and robbed and lost in the woods, right? And he has that really surreal experience with the the guy who lives in the woods. You think of Ern, right? But like that whole episode was like again, so that scary, horror element, right?
Yeah.
You kind of, I feel like that I don't know what he is. He's like this random drifter that's in the woods. Like, is he a real human or is he some sort of like
spirit,
right? That kind of emerges from the woods. Like you never know. Or Ern, right? Ern, who is on the verge of losing it again because Al wants to, Paperboy wants to fire him because he's not being a good enough manager. And like, what's the thing at the end of season 2 that gets Ern to keep his job? They're going into the airport security. He realizes that he still has that golden gun, right? That he got from his uncle at the very beginning of the season. He slips it into somebody else's bag. And it's this like kill or be killed sort of world, right? And Al is like, you have like this instinct, like you get me, you're willing to do what it takes. I'm gonna like Ern has to earn his place by throwing somebody else under the bus. Like he can't advance with clean hands. Like it's this very, like you said, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And for me, this brings up these questions of like our fundamental posture towards what tragedy is, right? Because, and I think we might've talked about this in a past episode, like as a kind of baseline artistic sort of theory or literary theory, there's like, the difference between Greek tragedy and Christian tragedy. Like if you look at Euripides and like, the sort of like Greek drama, like classical Greek drama, the whole worldview was like, it didn't matter what you did, right? The world was stacked against you, right? Like your moral choices, your individual choices don't matter. Like you think of Oedipus, right? Like Oedipus is foretold at the very beginning that he's going to, marry his mother and kill his father, whatever it is. So he tries to run against his fate, but it's fate. Like there's this kind of fatalism behind Greek tragedy because the gods are capricious and nothing that you do matters. And then you shift into Christian tragedy, which you see in like Shakespeare, right? Macbeth, all that sort of stuff. Like tragedy becomes about your moral choices and bad things happen because you make bad choices. And it's interesting, like in our, I don't know what you want to call it, right?
Like born out of like the fact that you're just flawed, right? Like you're born with a flaw, and it's like you can't help but act out of that flaw,
But there's still possibilities for redemption, right? Like there is kind of like there are these tragic elements to it, right? But there also is this like the moral choices that you make matter, right? In this kind of like Christian conception of the world. But it's like we're now moving into this post-Christian world where you get a series like Atlanta where it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like you're Oedipus and you're marked. It doesn't matter what you do, Zeus is still going to come down on you. Like it doesn't matter what you do. Like you put out this mixtape that gets you notoriety. You're still going to get mugged. You're putting away. You're plotting a course for your cousin to have like a successful career. The only way that you're able to do it is by compromising yourself morally and like throwing other people under the bus, right? Like it's this inherent. Like there is no right choice in a situation like this. It very like Atlanta feels like it has like a Greek sort of pagan cosmology beneath the surface. It's like nothing I do matters. It all sucks. It's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that I think that is I think that's what this show does really well in some ways, right? I think it does kind of take things out of the realm of just individual choice, right? Like that there is some sort of environment or system that these people are a part of that like in some ways means that they're having to play with like against a stacked deck, the deck is stacked against them. And so they kind of have to make the best of bad choices to write their way out of a really screwed up situation, where it's like Robin season, like all the time. And like you got to know, like these people are like it's because I think it is so easy just to like look at the moral failings of characters in shows like this, right? And I think this is one of the things that's really interesting about what the show does, that when you get any white people in the show. They're like, it's, you know, I think about like the white Instagram lady who quotes Paperboy's lyrics, and she's just like, I can't believe that like he would. I mean, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Kendrick Lamar too.
Yeah.
That like we can be so like offended and scandalized by a world we don't understand.
Yeah.
You know, like they don't know. She doesn't
Yeah.
know what Paperboy has to go through to get ahead, right?
And she's reading those lyrics in front of her kid too, which is the interesting thing, right? Like I think you see her child over her shoulder. Like you're the one putting this into your kid's brain. It's not Paperboy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or at least doubling down on that, right? Like you're doubling down on the fact that this is going in and making it so that, you know, Paperboy and everyone who looks like him are people you should be afraid of or scandalized by or whatever, right? Like there's something just that, I mean, a kid doesn't know how to make those distinctions, right? Like that's where you see how this stuff gets perpetuated. But so much of it is like not understanding that, you know, these are all people who are like traumatized, you know, like, I mean, they really are like, they're all living constantly in trauma, watching people get killed and possibly even killing people. And no wonder they're all smoking weed all the time, man. Like, you know, like to just numb it out. Like, and that was that one episode with the frat party. That episode was wild.
Yes.
But
so bizarre.
Yes, it was too much. But you see the desperation that Alfred has to find pot, you know, like, because it's almost the only way that he knows how to like numb the anxieties and the pains and the fears that are there. I mean, I don't know if you felt this way, but like I was watching the show and I was like low level scared the entire time. Like every episode, I was just like in this kind of like baseline level of fear, you know? And
I think that's part of the point, right? Like the thing to you as the viewer, right? Who's not living in that atmosphere, but it's a way of giving you a taste of this thing that like, that's part of life, right? Yeah,
exactly. And for these people, right? Like, and I'm sure, you know, in some ways too, like, because every time they met someone, I'm like, oh, these people are going to hurt them. Or like, this is going to, you know what I mean? Like I was always feeling like, and I think that's what the show captures brilliantly is like the experience of Black life in America, you know, like where you're never like, it's just kind of like, are you kind of checking me out? Are you looking at me? Like, are you, you know, you know, what does Ern say? Like in that episode where he has the money and he keeps, what's the word he uses?
Which episode?
Stunting. Is it people are stunting me?
Oh, yes.
Sometimes the stunted needs to be the stunter. Like, I mean, it's like that idea that like you gotta, you know, you kind of always have to be aware that either you're going to stunt someone or you're going to get stunted. And like, that's just kind of how the game is played. And I was like amazed again by this show. What it brings you into is that lived experience.
Yeah.
Which I think the only real, if we're willing to let ourselves feel that, you can't respond to it with judgment. You just can't.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't think it's like approval of whatever, but it's certainly understanding, you know, and compassion and like, well, I don't know what else you could do here.
Yeah.
You know?
Cause what would it be to live in a situation like this? Right. I mean, see, this is why I think the Greek tragedy versus like Christian tragedy is instructive here, because if you think about the cosmology that Greek tragedy grew out of, right? And we mentioned Lord of Spirits earlier. Like they have some really interesting episodes where they talk about like what, you know, the place of the demonic, right, in the classical world. That, you know, as Paul says at one point, that the gods of the nations are demons, like Zeus and Athena and whatever it is, or like these demons that had places of authority over these people and created this like exploitative, cruel world. I mean, I think the posture of pre-Christian peoples was that the world is like harsh and cruel and somebody's out to get you because yes, Zeus and Athena and Ares and whatever it is, like were these cruel beings that were out to get them. And it just kind of perpetuated this like exploitative, harsh, nasty world. And then the demons are overthrown, right? When Christ comes and he knocks the idols of Egypt down, right? And he brings us something new. And which I think opens up the possibility of like a different worldview that is not tragic in the same way that it is in this pre-modern, pre-Christian sort of era. But it's interesting to me, like a show like this, which is yet living in trauma, right? Living in like systematic sort of unhealth. Because how does a human being, how do you have to internalize this on some point? It's going to wear down at your soul.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's going to change the way that you see the world. And that's the thing, like there's something very unchristian about it. Not in the sense of like the characters are doing something wrong, but like clearly like these kinds of reactions, this kind of kill or be killed sort of society, like is not reflecting something that is liberated. Like it's like the demons have kind of like propped themselves back up again, or rather we have propped them back up through some of our own sort of like co-working in their exploitation, as opposed to co-working Christ as he's knocking these idols down. Like, I don't know. It feels very, you're looking at this and it could be something out of like, you know, I don't know if I'm making any sense with that.
This, yeah, you are. But I think that like what's hard though, again, is to recognize the kill or be killed. I think there's a clear why to that. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's because there's no other way. There's no other way out of like the thing that they're in. Right. It's not like they can just be these really nice people and kind of find their way out of, you know, the hellhole that they're in. You know, it's like to me, it comes back to that episode of like where Ern finally has money. He's trying to go take Vanessa out on these dates. He goes because he looks poor. Like they are sent away. You know, he tries to pay for movie tickets with $100 bill, and like the woman is like, I can't really take this. You know, do you have any ID for your debit card? And like they need to make a copy of it all, and it's all just like so weird. You know, so even when he is trying to be kind of above board with stuff, and he is acting out of a place of integrity and honesty, the system is like so designed against him that like he can't win, even working within the you know, the confines of what he's got to deal with. So I do think that the show shows you a why it's kill or be killed, and you can't, you're like, man, like I really don't know what else there is to do here, right? And so even when he goes, then he tries to talk to that one guy who's paying with $100 bill, the white guy who has no problem doing it, and the guy just flashes his gun at him.
Yeah,
right. Shows him that he's carrying on his side, and you're like, what is happening right now? You know, like, what is going on? Yeah, there's no way that this guy can get ahead. Really, it's a. You know, and I do think that what happened in the past was like that. It was like, well, the gods have just ordained this, as a way to justify, you know, really poor treatment of the other. And I even think about, you know, like and maybe I've shared this before, but like when slavery was a thing in America, like some Spanish priest like came and saw what was going on. He came across on the ships and saw how like these Africans were being treated. And he wrote back to his bishop, and he was like, what? And the bishop was just like, it's cool. We've prayed about it. Yeah. You know, and it's like that kind of like you speak to somehow sanctify what is really just a broken and sinful system, you know, like a truly exploitative world. And like this, you know, the God story that we have is not big enough to include the other in that. And like that, this show brilliantly, I think, makes you stand directly in the feet of the other. You know, and that's why you feel low level scared the entire time. And so what I feel like, you know, what the show brings forward is it's not like the path forward is not one of just like be a better person and stop like smoking weed and stop throwing guns in people's bags and stop. It's like, no, the path forward is actually just the cross, which is, you know, God's act of radical solidarity with suffering humanity. And I wonder, like, that's what this show I feel like this show actually is like the path of the cross. You know, it puts us, the viewer, in radical solidarity with the experiences of these people. And, you know, we gotta, I think, move toward the other.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'm making any sense, or I'm just kind of rambling.
No, I get that, right? Because I think that, and this even I think is a temptation that we have as modern American Orthodox Christians, to even talk about like problems, right? To talk about sort of, you know, social things, but to use kind of American language rather than sort of like, you know, Orthodox church language, to speak with sort of like a modern American political mind rather than the mind of the church. Because I think an instinct that we can have in a situation like this is, like you said, like try harder, right? Or don't do bad things, as if like, you know, we read things in terms of like the American sort of individualist sort of narrative. Like you have to make the most of this like situation. But I think like this path of like solidarity, this path of it's not me versus you. It's like, it's only us, and it's only like God with us that's going to allow things to get better. You know, because like, to use a metaphor that comes to mind as you're painting this picture, as Glover and you know, and his creative team is painting this picture. It's like, if you take a plant and you put it in a room and you don't water it, and you shut out, like you turn off all the lights and shut the windows and the shutters, and it's pitch darkness, like that plant is going to wither, you know,
yes.
like, right.
Yes.
Like it's not just kind of like, at some point you can't just try harder when, like you said, the sort of system is designed for your failure, right? Or the system is designed
to grow.
Right. It's not the plant's fault. And like, and that's one of the things that I think is this interesting tension too about, because this I think is like, I mean, let's see if I can figure out a way to express this properly, right? Because when apartheid ended in South Africa, right, one of the things that Mandela and the other people realized is that sort of like that reconciliation that really needed to happen is that if there is kind of an oppressive system, everybody who's involved in it is a victim in some sort of way, right? Everybody who is involved in it is like injured in some sort of way, whether you're part of the oppressive team or you're part of those who are like being oppressed. Everybody is sick in some sort of way. Everybody is a victim. And like the only way that healing is going to come is if everybody admits, like tells their stories, right? And we can all sort of like collectively move forward together. Because, you know, there's a difference, I think, between you have this like empathy of Ern and Al and this like core group of characters who are all just doing their best, right? None of them are bad people as you get to know them, right? None of them are consciously trying to do the worst thing in a particular sort of situation. And yet, when they come up against other characters, like the other characters appear bad constantly, right? The other, like somebody's always out to rob you, somebody's always out to whatever, because like this, the way the system is designed is to create these kind of like competitive interactions with people. At the very end, the season finale of season 2, when Ern takes the gun out of his bag and puts it in somebody else's bag and gets them arrested, like that's a bad thing on some level, and without any other sort of context, it's a bad thing. And yet, like, because again, like that gun is like Chekhov's gun that's there from the first episode of the season. Like there's this complicated backstory as to why it's there. Like he's not purposely trying to hurt somebody. He's trying to survive in that moment. Yeah. And it's like, how is it that people who are just trying to do their best, like who love people, who have families and friends that they care for, are suddenly put in these circumstances where it's kill or be killed, right? That's like, we're all victims in that situation.
Well, and honestly, I think you just nailed it. Like, and I think all sin is that way, is like just trying to survive. Yeah. Right. Like that somehow we're held, and we've talked about this, it's Panioti Nellis, right? Like his deification in Christ, like that the cycle is that, we sin because we die, and that there's some like level of comfort or something that we get, some level of strategizing away from death that the passions seem to offer, right? And we believe it. We believe that. But often what ends up happening, kind of like what you're just suggesting, we sacrifice other people to the monster, So like, I may be free from the monster myself right now by, but as a result, I'm feeding you directly to it. Same's true when we gossip, right? We take the eyes off of ourselves and put them on other people. So we kind of like, we sacrifice them. We which is really back to that Teddy Perkins episode, right? Like that's how he speaks with Darius. Like you will be the sacrifice.
Yeah.
So like I'm basically feeding you to the monster so that I can myself, you know, do it. Which I don't really understand why he needed to sacrifice him. But because did he want to kill his brother? What was going on? He was going to use Darius to make it look like he killed Benny.
Yes, I think that's what it was.
So that Teddy would be free to like live his life.
Yes. Which again, right? Like my flourishing can only happen with blood, but it's your blood.
Yeah. Right? Which is really how Teddy grew up, you know?
Yeah. And that whole me versus you, right? I mean, even because it starts young, like there's the FUBU episode, which is at the very end of season 2, right? The second to last one of season 2, where Ern as a kid, he gets the yellow jersey, right? And it turns out that like he got it from Marshall's and it's a knockoff, but then there's the other kid who has money who gets the real jersey, and people realize like, oh, now that they're side by side, one of these is real, one of them is fake. And it's he will be teased mercilessly if he's the kid that's wearing the fake jersey. And he's identified actually at one point. The kid comes, looks at the tags, like, this one's made in Bangladesh. You're wearing the fake jersey, Ern. And then Al comes and says, no, it's the other kid that's wearing the fake jersey. And he's the one who then gets teased mercilessly. And the punchline is he kills himself. Right? It's like the only way that Ern is saved in that moment is like somebody else has to die. And this is the sort of situation that we've created for ourselves, right? Where like, and this is the way of the cross, right? Because like Adam, right? Adam like sins and he says somebody else has to die. Like Eve has to die. It's her fault, right? It's Eve's fault that I ate from the apple. God, it's your fault for giving me this woman. And yet what does God do, right? What does Jesus do? He willingly dies. The only thing that breaks the cycle is the ending of like the sacrificing of the other and the willingness to sacrifice the self. Like it's only Christ who destroys this cycle. And yeah, there's no amount of politics, there's no amount of whatever that's going to fix this, but like, this is like, I don't know, this is like, it's a world in which untouched by Christianity. Like this is exactly the sort of like brutal cycle that when the apostles were preaching in ancient Athens and ancient Egypt, like when we say the idols were being knocked down, like this is the world into which they were preaching. And it's like the world in which we live and pat ourselves on the back as if we live in a Christian country. Like there's nothing about this is right,
no,
right? Nothing about this is right.
It's interesting, man, because I do feel like, I increasingly feel like the call of the gospel is one of radical solidarity with the world, as evidenced by the cross, right? Like the cross is God's movement toward humanity, so much so that he fully drank the cup of death, right? And it seems to me that our kind of iteration of faith is like really clean. You know, we want like our nice churches and we want to go to like do our nice pious things and with our nice houses and our nice stuff that we want to give to our nice kids. And like, we don't recognize, I think, like the reality of the world's brokenness, largely because I think to look at it is to see our own. You know, like I had this weird moment the other, and maybe this will sound really weird, but, and maybe there's a connection. Maybe you can help me figure it out, but it just came to mind. I had a moment the other day with a friend who was doing a thing, and it was really frustrating to me. And I was like, this is so frustrating to me that this person does this thing. And, you know, I'm like, they say this one thing, and then the choices that they make are not doing that thing that they say they want to do. I don't understand. And I kind of was like reflecting more on it with my wife. And I was just like, I wonder, you know, like if part of the thing here is that like what's driving me nuts about this person right now is like their inconsistency. And what really drives me nuts, though, is actually the fact that their inconsistency brings out my own inconsistency, because I think I'm this really loving, kind, tolerant, non-judgmental, patient person. And now here I am being frustrated by this person, revealing that not all parts of me are kind and loving and patient, and that I have this thing in me that's not consistent with that idea of myself. And rather than saying, oh, like, I'm not loving and I'm not patient and I'm not kind, it's way easier to say, like, no, you're just frustrating. Does that make sense? Like, you're the frustrating one. I'm not impatient and unkind. Like, you're the way you're messing me up. You're making me mad.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Rather than,
it's not my fault.
Yeah. You're just a maddening person.
Yeah. You're the one who's broken here.
Yeah. Exactly. And if I could just make you more consistent, then I would never have to deal with my own being mad.
Yeah.
Does that make sense at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. And that I think is the illusion of holiness, right? It's when we create these kind of curated environments, right? Because if I always have a full belly and the lights always turn on when I switch them on, and my stuff is always where I put it, right? If I have this world that is this sort of consumeristic world where everything is controlled in the way that I want it, I can sort of lull myself into thinking that I'm a pleasant person, that everything is fine. Yes. It's only when things are out of whack on the outside that they reveal like the thing that is out of whack on the inside. And I think the more that we as like modern American Christians like prioritize this world of comfort, right? Because it's easy to be, I think like C.S. Lewis talks about this at one point too, right? He's like, it's easy to be a good person. And I say this with quotes, like when your stomach is full and you don't have any pains in your body, right? And nobody is there doing anything, right? If you're just kind of there, yeah, sure, you've got charitable thoughts about everybody, right? But it's hard when your back is constantly aching, or when this person is actually in your face. Like that's revealing like the rough parts within you that are otherwise covered. And
if nothing else, what it does reveal is just like your utter fragility, right?
Yes.
That like, even if it's, there, because I think there is something reasonably to be expected that like people in chronic pain are going to have a harder time probably having the energy to be nice to people. But isn't that interesting, right? That like, and that might not even be something necessarily that's just like, you need to work on that. And you need to like, make sure that even when you're in pain, you're really nice to somebody, as much as to admit, holy cow, look at this, right? Like, I'm so fragile that like, I'm so in need of healing. Like, this is just me at the end of this actually is my limitation.
Yeah.
Thank God that I can see that. This is a gift. This is a gift for me, instead of thinking that like I'm God, my imperfections can actually be a source of divine encounter instead of, because our God is one who goes to the cross, who embraces human weakness and makes that his dwelling place. Like that's incredible, and I think what we want to do is we want to only find Christ in the church, right? But the Christian is the one who finds Christ in everything, who can look at Atlanta and say, this also is Christ.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that to me is the radical path of solidarity with the world. Yeah. To be, for goodness sake, right? Every service, O heavenly King, O Comforter, the Spirit of truth, who art everywhere present and filling all things. Like that is an incredible thing that we pray. We don't believe it. We don't believe it.
Yes. And we can tell that in our actions. Right?
Filling nice things, who are some places present and filling only the nice things that I like looking at, but not the things that I don't like looking at. He doesn't fill those things.
Yeah. Cause that's bad.
Yeah. Nonsense.
But I'm the one who gets to pick. I'm the one who gets to pick.
Yeah, exactly. God is in Oreos, but not in tofu eggs.
Right. Yeah. And this is why I think it's so interesting that we're having this conversation during Lent, right? Because like this is one of the struggles of Lent. I mean, like the point, right, of fasting and praying and all of this is like we're constantly trying to walk ourselves to our points of weakness in a way that we maybe don't the rest of the year. Because I have a full belly all year, right? I'm not food insecure, right? And I thank God for it. Like I'm not, because here I am, it's Wednesday of the second week of Lent when we're doing this, and I'm already getting cranky, You know, I can't imagine what it would be like to like live
Yeah.
in a food insecure, like all the time.
Yeah.
And
Well,
suddenly
and
the
this is-
real Steve, the non-manicured Steve is beginning to come out because like, yeah, man, I feel my stomach growling in a way that it doesn't. And like, I'm a little bit like more short with people. And
that's because your spirit is frail. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what this is to reveal, is like, because I think that this is what we do. And this is what I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, it's weird to me that like the way we talk about fasting so much is about this like strengthening of the will, I got to make my will to resist sin stronger, because isn't part of our issue our willfulness? Like, isn't that part of the thing that gets us into trouble, is just thinking like we need to like just try harder and like do more of the things and all of this kind of, so if you just pray more and you fast more, then your will get stronger, and then you won't do that thing anymore, and then you do that thing and you think, well, I must not be trying and praying hard enough, so more will, and then like you do the thing again, and like, why is more will the thing that is the way to go? I almost wonder, because that to me that seems like a path of ascent, right? Like we're on trying to put ourselves on this path of ascent to strengthen ourselves, to get those spiritual gains, and all of that kind of stuff. But Christ's path is one of descent, before it's one of ascent, right? Like he came down from heaven to earth, went from earth to the grave. You know, like there's this path down toward human weakness and fragility that like becomes the path of ascent. I wonder, like, if really stripping away all of these things that we've found comfort in, you know, most of the time, is the thing that goes to like, holy cow, like God is giving me a gift here by it being Wednesday of the second week of Lent and showing me just how frail of soul I am.
Yeah.
That, like, really, like, this is it. And like, yes, like, can I meet myself here and free myself from the delusion that I had about myself last week, that I was a nice, loving, caring person, in a way that actually does feel like crucifixion.
Yeah.
I am not as loving and patient and kind as I thought that I was. And that hurts, because I want to be those things. And like, I think that that's what makes God love me.
Yes, because I have to earn it.
Yeah.
Right, because I have to earn it. And this becomes the mystery of synergy at the end of the day, because like, yes, if as we progress in holiness, hopefully like our will is getting stronger, and we're going to be like, you know, you think about where you were as an infant, right? When you're hungry, you cry. When you're wet, you cry. I mean, like there was clearly like a very brittle self-centered will, right?
Yes.
But it's also sort of realizing that like, to the extent that my will is getting stronger as I do these Christian things, as I practice being a Christian, it's like, it's not just me doing this psychological, ethical thing myself. Like it is, like as Paul says, right? Like to the extent that I pray, it is the Spirit praying in me, right? To the extent that I'm making right choices. So it's like, I can't even take credit. It's not like it's just a psychological muscle that I'm training by fasting, so I can get better at it, and then just pull a different kind of Pharisee and be like, yes, look at like the amazing progress that I made during Lent. It's the, you know, it's the opening, it's the emptiness so that we can be filled, right? It's the descending so that we can ascend. It's these weird sort of like paradoxes and tensions that all kind of come together. And that's the important thing that has to happen, because like, yeah, God willing, like our will be stronger because it's the will of God in us. It's not just like me making smarter choices, you know? And that's part of, I think, the humility of the Christian life at the end of the day. Like, we're not earning our way into heaven or anything like that. We're just getting out of the way so that God can do more in and through us.
Which I think that's why so much of the language that we use is sort of confusing to me, because it does so much sound like us just trying to make heal ourselves, right? Like, and because I've heard those words, like we come here, we want to clean ourselves, we want to heal ourselves, and I'm like, I don't think I can do that. Like, I think I've tried that a whole bunch, and I'm not any better. I'm just not any better. Go ahead.
The thing that I'll say about this, which I think is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately too, because there's a lot of like Orthodox Christian voices that are out there now. Like there's so many podcast videos, whatever it is. But I'm just constantly under the impression that, you know, there's so many of like these Orthodox Christian voices that are out there who are actually like, if you strip away some of the Orthodox buzzwords, right, are actually just kind of thinking and processing like Americans or like Europeans or like whatever, right? You know, and I say this again from like a position of privilege on some level. Like I've been to Athos like a dozen times, and I've had like very deep, extended sort of conversations with even American-born monks that have gone and spent a lifetime on Athos, and you could see like they're different. They, you know, when you read something in the pages of the Fathers and you have a conversation with this person, like, oh yeah, they're thinking about things the same way. They're not just throwing around Orthodox buzzwords. And like, one of the troubles is like when you see us as contemporary Orthodox Christians who are actually like, we're actually using like American Protestant categories or American political categories to think about these things.
Yes.
You know, you strip away at it and it's like, no, that actually isn't the mind of the church. It's actually just like a very narrowly political or cultural sort of mind. And you know, this is one of our challenges as I think like contemporary Orthodox Christians to actually sort of like acquire and be open to the mind of the church, as opposed to just copying and pasting like Orthodox buzzwords to be a veneer that coats like, you know, old world European whatever or new world whatever, but it's like it's not of Christ. It's just like a particular culture or a particular like narrow strip of politics. And I wonder if part of, so I wonder if like there you know, the evolution of how we talk about things like, you know, matters in some sense, right? Because like I wonder if for kind of like our cultural moment and like some of the stuff that you're talking about, because I do think that so much of like the church language has been co-opted by some like very just like flattened political and in some cases I think extremist viewpoints. I wonder like if this is where we need to almost get again clearer with how we speak of it and say the mind of Christ, right? Like to acquire the mind of Christ, and like that at the end of the day is what we're going for, and that the church is like a way to gain that, but he himself is the way, right? Like this is the church is a path to that, and like the services are a path to that, and prayer is a path to that, and all of these things. But ultimately where we're trying to get is to acquire that mind of Christ and to see him in all things and in all places and in all people, right? Yeah. Because if we had that, then there wouldn't be this kind of like exclusionary, we're in, you're out, like, because he's everywhere, right? Like everything is in him. How could anything be excluded from that? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? And not by him. To the extent that we're excluded, it's because we're the older brother keeping ourselves out, but it's not.
Right, exactly. And even there, like Christ is there too.
Yes.
Right. Like, but I stand at the door and I knock. Right. Yeah. So it's like, it's not, he's still there.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy.
I can has, please. I can has. So I don't know. I don't know. It's just.
No, it's important, right? And this actually I think even like connects with our attempt at ministry, right? Because I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I feel like we made an unconscious decision a long time ago. Like even when we sort of like we made Y2AM and we kind of like thought about the way that we were going to present ourselves to the world. Like we never relied on stereotypical sort of Orthodox branding or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like we never relied on the crutch of like copy pasting Orthodox Christian language. Like I think one of our challenges and one of the process over the course of the last 8 years now that we've been doing this thing is to figure out ways to be like to acquire the mind of Christ in a substantive and real sort of way, right? By speaking the language of the culture and by like wrestling with real questions that people are struggling with, and not just kind of relying on, well, if I say hypostasis and, you know, whatever often enough, like that's, you know, it's like the difference between veneer and like real wood, right? Real wood, which can be sort of like knotty and difficult to work with, and just like veneer, which is like goes on plywood. Like we try to avoid the veneer and like try and focus on the substance, which is work, you know, which is why we engage with pop culture in shows like this, which is why we talk to young people who've fallen away from the church in pop culture in We Are Orthodoxy, like all these things which are not just like leaning on forms as a crutch, so that we can actually sort of like do the deep work of like internalizing the mind of mind of Christ. Because there's a difference, right? There's like, just because something looks Orthodox, right, doesn't actually mean that it fundamentally is like speaking with the, you know, you put an Orthodox sticker on like, that's just like typical woke whatever, or that's just typical reactionary whatever. Like, you know, the donkey of the Democrats and the elephant of the Republicans, like put a beard on it. You can sort of say like it's Orthodoxy, but it's not. It's just like, it's American whatever with a Kalimafki and a long beard.
It's a golden idol still.
Yeah.
You know, you're what you're bringing up for me right now is like, I'm thinking again about, it's fun to read, like kind of watch this in line with like Lamar's album that we discussed. And I'm thinking now about like the video, like the Humble video, right? And when he's sitting at like the Last Supper table with his homies, and like he's sitting in the seat of Christ, like I don't think that that's an irreverent thing that he did there, right? But rather like what he's doing is pulling us into like this, I think almost this kind of like prophetic moment of being able to say like, if we can't really see Christ here, can we really see him anywhere? Right? Like if you can't see him in the thing that makes you uncomfortable in other, because like Jesus made people uncomfortable. I think we've made him way too comfortable for ourselves. Like he's kind of like this nice little pet that we like to take with us, who believes what we believe and who wants our sports teams to win and who wants our armies to win. And like, he's very much for like our nation and our ethnicity and our church even, right? Like he's the mascot of Orthodoxy, but you know,
he's not the Old Testament one, right? The Old Testament one is the cruel one, but buddy Jesus.
Yeah. And even when we say like, God bless our troops, like, you know, things like this, it's like, well, what about the other guy's troops? Like, is he not, but should we not pray that he blesses those troops? Like it's a very, like, it's this tribalistic God that we've gathered. And so we made him look like us, and we've made him think like us, and we've made him love like us. You know, he loves our people, but not the others. And there's such a deep resistance to otherness, right? That we have kind of in our own world, you know, like we're scared of things that aren't like us. And then we're confronted with God, who is the supreme other.
Yes.
And we think we're going to be comfortable with that. And yet we haven't even learned to love our brother whom we see. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
No, because it's far easier to like reduce God to our own image, right? Than actually perfect ourselves in the image of God, right? To remember who's the source, right? Who's the prototype and who's the icon. And I think sometimes it's easier for us to sort of like make ourselves the prototype, to do the Pharisee thing and to kind of make ourselves the God. And he's just this projection of our minds. Because I think like that point about otherness is something that's really worth zooming in on here, right? Because the fundamental movement of creation, right, is like at the very beginning, before you even get into, we did a Be the Bee episode on this one time, like Maximus the Confessor, he's got kind of like the 5 distinctions that are at work in all of existence. Like the fundamental one is that the uncreated God creates. Literally anything that is not God is other, just by virtue of the fact that it's made.
Yes.
Right. And God's like love is so deep.
Created.
Yeah. That's the core. There's him. And then there's everything else, right? There's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And there's everything else.
The end.
And like, what a move that is out of himself. Right. And like Maximus, when he talks about even the poetry of creation, that, you know, God pours himself into nothingness, and nothingness responds by being so enamored with God that it like pours itself into being, like, because God is our other at the same time too. And like our posture is like, you know, and this fundamental move of otherness, which is like the tension behind all of the love that exists. Like the love between a man and a woman is a love between otherness. Like the love between neighbors is a love between otherness. And yet we're so, when it's just us, right? Because everything is in control, and we have the illusion that we're nice people, respectable people. right? My grass is mowed, my picket fence is white, but the other like pops our bubble sometimes, and the other calls us out of ourselves. Whereas like the modern world is so built about like feeding ourselves.
We don't want that. Like we want to be comfortable and okay. And even like that moment, you know, that party that they go to, the Juneteenth party, with that rich white guy,
wild
and
episode,
his black bourgeois wife, right? Like it's very clear that this white guy has commoditized blackness.
Yeah.
Like even his wife is kind of like a commodity that he like possesses in some way. And like he's like, oh, have you ever been to the motherland? Or what is he says like some really weird thing to earn, and like earns like, I have no idea where I come from.
Yes.
You know, and that is blackness. That's an encounter that makes someone uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
To be black in America is to have, in some real sense, for most people, no idea where they actually came from. That heritage has been wiped out, which you as Greeks would not understand. Which
I can go to Cyprus and I can see the house where my father was born, that my grandfather built with his bare hands. Like, there's people who don't have access to that heritage and identity, which is wild.
Yes, I know, because of it's been cut back, and you can trace your family beyond that probably even too. But we want to commoditize or fit these kinds of otherness into boxes that make us just feel more comfortable dealing with them, you know, rather than understanding that core to otherness is going to be an encounter, like an actual encounter with an other that I cannot control or possess, right? And yet we try to do this with God. We want to say our 100 Jesus prayers so that we can like have some sort of great success at grabbing at him, which is the other thing too that Jesus says when he rises from the dead, right? Do not hold on to me.
Yeah.
We can't possess him.
Yeah.
You know, like we just can't. This is a guy who can walk through walls. We can't possess that guy. Yeah. You know, like the more you tighten your grip, the more systems will slip through your fingers. The one moment when Leia has a British accent. But I think that that's what we try to do, like with otherness that's so inconceivable to us. Yeah. Like we try to tighten our grip and make it ours, to own it in some way or possess it or control it, that we actually cut ourselves off from it. But what we see that the other does, what God, the ultimate other does, the way he expresses his love is by standing in solidarity. Yeah. Right? Like God's love for us shows up by like being embodied with those things, right? Like even creation is like on some level, like this incarnate experience of God's own love. Mm-hmm. It's this outpouring of himself, right? Like you said, like
in physical terms. Yeah.
In physical terms, like all the created order is itself not, you know, the incarnation, the nativity according to the flesh of our Lord and God and Savior Jesus Christ, but it is in some sense like an incarnation of God's own love. Mm-hmm. Like it is a thing that has been made material by the love of God. And like, this is why, you know, in the beginning of Romans, like, Paul says that whole bit about like the created order bearing witness to God. Like it's because it points directly to him.
The heavens declare the glory of the Lord.
God in all things, everywhere present, filling all things. Look at, like, this is an incarnate expression of his love. But we can't approach the other unless we can approach the other. You know, I don't know if that makes any sense. The capital O other.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And it's got to start there. It's got to start there, right? Yeah. Because I think we're so, and distinctions matter, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, like there are going to be heretics out there. There are going to be bad people out there or whatever it is. Right. But like in Matthew 25, right? Judgment Sunday, like Jesus doesn't qualify who we're supposed to stand in solidarity with. He doesn't say like, you know, you fed me to the extent that it wasn't a heretic or it wasn't to this or it wasn't to that, like just other person. Mm-hmm. Right. And that like solidarity and that communion actually like is this ground level that allows things to open up. You know, I think we're so interested in like drawing these distinctions between us and sort of like maintaining the otherness of the other, as opposed to the otherness actually becomes this invitation to love, you know? Because I mean, I feel like all of those things would have a fundamentally different posture if we could sort of like stand in that solidarity with each other. And then we can figure out the rest. afterwards. But if we kind of like start with this like posture of love and openness, we can begin surmounting some of these other things. But if the more we kind of like dig in our heels, the more these other things like remain. I'm speaking in very vague terms. I don't know if I'm being like clear right now, but I don't know. It starts with love, right? It starts with this generous, like boundless kind of love, which is the only thing that breaks that tragic kill or be killed cycle that you see in Atlanta.
Yeah. And everywhere kind of that you go, that's not of like the Lord, right? Like that's the way of the world is kill or be killed.
Yeah.
The way of the cross is to stand in solidarity with those who are dying. Like that is it. Like full stop. That's the way of the cross. It's the way of voluntarily entering death for the sake of life.
Yeah.
Full stop. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I don't know what that means for us. But I do know that the show was really great and I like it.
It was very good. And I'm looking forward to the new seasons whenever they come out. Because Donald Glover does good stuff. And this is a very good thing that he and his creative team made.
Well done.
I don't know.
Well done, Troy.
Yeah. Oh, would that Abed were a part of this as well.
Yes. What if he shows up at one point? That would be something else.
And they do the high five and just don't acknowledge it. It's like Princeton. It just happens and then like he moves on.
Yeah, exactly. The end. All right.
Okay. So I feel like we barely scratched the surface. There's so much more, but we're at an hour and a half. We'll put a pause on the conversation there. But we'll end as we always do with Philanthropy Corner. And why don't you tell us what we're talking about on Philanthropy Corner this week?
Yeah, I think this week I kind of was thinking that there's not so much a particular organization that I think that I wanted to point to as much as just highlighting specifically, right, that kind of some of the stuff we've talked about is about standing in solidarity with otherness. Like that is a big theme of Atlanta, and it's a big call of the gospel. Great Lent itself is not simply just a time for prayer and fasting and going to church, as if to like somehow just bolster ourselves, but really is about using those things as a way of preparing for the ultimate act of God's own radical solidarity with humankind, the cross. Like this is the path that we're on, is one of moving toward God's own radical solidarity with humanity. And so the church gives us this time to prepare for that, and also understanding that if that's the case of how God acts with us, that we are, that he stands in solidarity with all of humankind, then that means that all of humankind stands in solidarity with one another. Mm-hmm. And the church presents us with almsgiving as an essential component of our walk with Christ during this time of the Great Fast, to help us recognize that the plight of our neighbor is actually our own plight, that we are not separate from one another, that this is a time to recognize that our neighbor's hunger is our hunger, our neighbor's suffering is our suffering, and that giving alms is not just an individualistic act of piety that somehow exists to help you detach from your stuff, but is an essential way to embrace the unitive reality of the cross. So I do think that the almsgiving act becomes itself almost like a sacramental act of participating in Christ. And so I hope that we can all just kind of move forward on that, embrace almsgiving as an act of solidarity, to stand alongside someone who is hungry. I've even thought that it might be kind of a cool practice to be like, I'm going to give you my lunch and I'll take your hunger instead, like that would be kind of a cool way to kind of embrace like that unitive reality of our shared suffering, of our shared hunger, of our shared humanity. There is no difference, that love your neighbor as yourself. I've heard can be translated, love your neighbor who is yourself. And that is, I think, kind of what we see from the cross, right? Is that there is certainly distinction between human beings, but not separation. And I hope that we can, keep all moving forward in this time of preparation as we receive this this move of the ultimate other who continually and is always moving toward us coming into the world. I don't know.
Well said. I mean,
Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds really good. I second that. Yeah, no, that's important. So I think, yeah, it's today's Philanthropy Corner is a bit more meta than normal, but I think it's worth highlighting, like just doubling down that that's important. This is not about our own private individualist religiosity, right? Because that again is thinking about the spiritual life in these very non-church terms. You know, it's about us. And almsgiving is one of these things that does break us out of our own private little bubble and reminds us that it's not just about me. My brother is my life. It's about us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well said.
That's good.
Well said.
That's good. Well, see you in a couple weeks.
So next time, I think we're doing Schitt's Creek.
I think that's the plan.
Super
Tight.
cool. Fun show. Ew.
And if we'll boop. If things change, we'll do our best to let everybody know.
Yes.
We're not
yeah, we'll do our best. We'll do our best. But the plan, I think, is Schitt's Creek in 2 weeks. So until next time.